All right. So once again, colleagues, I welcome you to this session for tonight. This is our first official lecture session for AUI 4862 for the 2025 academic year. So previously we held the orientation session in which I gave you guys an outline concerning the module, or rather concerning the assumed knowledge of this particular module. Right, so I'm going to start off from here and then introduce the first topic to you guys. So as discussed from the orientation videos that I already did, I'm going to also share the recordings, by the way, for the orientation session that we did. My apologies that it's been on hold for a while, but I'll endeavor to get them uploaded on the YouTube channel and shared with you guys in the respective groups in due course before end of this particular week. Anyways, coming back to this, so this AUI 4862, colleagues, it's a module that has got 6 important topics, namely topic 1, dealing with the concept of corporate governance and ethics in different organizational environments, followed by the topic 2 that deals with the role of internal audit in providing assurance on corporate governance. Topic 3, dealing with risk management in different organizational environments and the role of the internal audit in providing assurance on risk management. Topic 5, it introduces you to control in different organizational environments. And then lastly, topic 6, dealing with the role of the internal audit in providing assurance on control processes. So essentially, we can see that in AUI 4862, basing it from the definition of internal auditing, they are focusing on the 3 focus areas that we have as internal auditors, which is, of course, governance processes within an organization, followed, of course, by risk management processes within an organization, and lastly, control processes within an organization. According to the definition of internal auditing, we have a pivotal role to play in enhancing these 3 respective processes within the organization. Within different organizational environments for that matter. So now, of course, when we indulge in each one of these respective topics, we'll be getting into the details of things to say what part should the internal audit function play in respect to corporate governance processes within an organization. But of course, before you tap into that, that is why there's need for you to have a comprehensive understanding or comprehensive background concerning the subject of corporate governance itself. When you look at business entities out there, irrespective of industry or trade in which they are operating under, you need to have the background and understanding or knowledge rather of the concept of corporate governance, how it applies to these different organizations and their environments in which they function in. So those are some of the important things that we are going to be focusing on in this tonight's engagement. So I would introduce you tonight to corporate governance and ethics in different organizational environments. We're going to dwell probably about 3 sessions dealing with this particular concept, because what I normally do when I introduce a concept and we discuss it maybe from beginning to end, after we are done with the concept in question, we have to do a practical question, a practical discussion question. And the practical discussion question that I can bring to you, colleagues, it can be a question from past assignments, or it can be a question from past exam papers. So I can bring that and we can have that as a discussion. And that can be a session on its own in which we can be handling something of that nature. So for corporate governance, you can expect about approximately 3 to 4 sessions, right, on that particular subject matter. Anyways, sources of references, which are important to note. I know I might, of course, also identify this, brought that to the table for you. in the orientation, you need to have your Jackson stance or your audit notes. I believe the latest edition should be the 13th edition, but I think that is the 2024 version. There should be probably a 14th version currently in the 2025 academic year. Now, but the one that I'm using for the purposes of my discussions with you guys in this class is the 10th edition, reason being that I made footnotes in the textbook when I was doing my own personal study, and even also when I do presentation for classes concerning this subject area. It's one of, like as I mentioned earlier, this is one of those concepts which is very broad, covers and caters up on a lot of subject areas really within it. So it's to draft notes around it. Yeah, it was, for me, I felt it was going to take a long time. So hence what I did when I was doing my personal studies, I would go to the focus areas relevant or pertinent to this particular module, and then I make sure that I'm acquainted or I'm versed with regards to those aspects on corporate governance. So obviously, in this module, as I introduce it to you, right? You need to also have an understanding of how does the lecturer tests on this particular subject matter. It's very, very, very important. When you know, or when you have a perspective of how they test on the subject matter, it's then easier for you to have a strategy on how you can do your own personal study. And also it helps even on my side to have a best approach to convey the information to you guys, right? So very important, number one, the application of the knowledge to the case study scenario. That's what the lecturer tests. It's not a case of simply testing you on the assumed knowledge, meaning to say theory or concepts or principles that are conveyed within this module, but they test the application of the knowledge. And this normally would happen in a case where they provide you like a simulation, so to speak, a simulation more of a real life scenario, so to say, where you need to apply the principles of corporate governance in order to respond to the problem areas, or rather to the required parts in the exam, or perhaps even in the assignments. So your argument, so when I'm saying application of the knowledge to the case scenario, it simply means that your arguments or your response to the question, or to the required part that is conveyed in the question, should be backed up with facts. All right, so your arguments or your points should be backed up with facts or evidence which is provided in the scenario. For example, you can quote maybe the King 4 report, right, regarding maybe to the composition of the audit committee, to say there should at least be 3 members. All members should be independent, non-executive director, right? So it's good to quote the point of reference or the source reference in which they perhaps might want you to give a comment as whether there's compliance or non-compliance to that particular source. Maybe say it's the King 4 report in that respect. But over and above that, you then need to get to a stage where you comment, for instance. That is where you are applying now the knowledge of this principle to the scenario. So you can then say, for instance, if they asked you to comment on the compliance to the recommendations of the King 4 report, it can either be that there is compliance to the King 4 or there's non-compliance. But you need to explain to the lecturer, why are you saying that there's no compliance? And that's where those facts that's where those facts are backed up with evidence that you are, portrayed to, that is portrayed rather in the scenario provided, right? So for example, it can be that the composition of the audit committee is inadequate, right? If the composition of the audit committee is inadequate, there has to be valid reasons, valid evidence from the scenario that seems to prove or suggest that indeed there is inadequacy in terms of the composition of the audit committee. So it could be that maybe there are only 2 members in the audit committee as opposed to 3 members required as per the recommendations of the King 4 report. Or it could be that one of the members is an executive director, maybe in the capacity of a human resource director. Hence, he or she lacks independency to perform his or her duties accordingly. Or it could be that one of the non-executive directors is a material customer to the company. So this is a related party issue, obviously, that you can also come across. So what is happening here? It's just me trying to illustrate to you guys the fact or the notion that when you go through the principles, which I'm going to take you through now, you must be able to there's a word that I'm looking for, it's just skipping my mind. But you must be able to apply those concepts or those principles rather in a real life simulation or real life case study scenario, which the examiner would give you. Your marks would come from your ability to apply the principles to a real life scenario provided. That's where your marks would come from. So anyways, having said that, if you look into chapter 4, right? Chapter 4 in the audit notes, it covers on a lot of aspects, but more primarily the ones related to the King 4 report. Then there is your other prescribed, actually this one is the one I'm about to open, it's your prescribed textbook. So I just want to open it just as a point of reference to show you what it conveys when it comes to corporate governance as a concept, because you also need that when dealing with topic number 1, sorry, of this module. So let me quickly open it and then I'll show you. It's chapter 2 in this textbook, audit, internal audit perspective, or in audit perspective textbook. Right. So if you go to assurance and audit perspective textbook, which is bluish in color, chapter number 2, it deals with corporate governance. Let me check. Oh, by the way, this gentleman here, Mr. Dubrine, he was my lecturer at 3rd year when I was doing my 3rd year at UP, University of Pretoria, back in 2017. And also Dr. Kay Plant. She even facilitates master's program in internal auditing at UP. I think she's also doing, I think, an ad hoc also with UNISA for masters, and actually PhD at UNISA as well. So those are your authors. They're very good with audit, guys. They're very good, especially with internal audit. I think that's where, for me personally, my passion for internal auditing, it developed with the way they conveyed the knowledge of internal auditing to us, especially Dr. Kay Plant. She would really convey the information in a way that you understand exactly. If, for instance, we are talking about working papers, you'd understand clearly what a working paper is there for, what should be portrayed or conveyed in the working paper. Why is it important for the purpose of your audit file reporting, for instance, such information of that sort. But anyways, let's come back to what I want to discuss tonight. So in chapter 2 of this textbook, colleagues, it deals with the concept or the principle of corporate governance as well. Now, I want to show you just some differences in the textbooks in terms of focus areas on what the other textbook covers, which the other does not really cover, and why I'm using both as sources of reference for this matter. So let me take you to that. So in chapter 2, this is your prescribed textbook, guys, okay? So definitely it means everything that is conveyed within this book is very, very vital. It's very important. So they would give you a bit of history, reference, and development of governance. How did we develop or evolve rather to the governance principles that we have today? So obviously, when you're looking at corporate governance, one thing for sure, you have pillars on corporate governance that are statutory in nature, meaning to say they are governed by law, right? And then you've got those, and when I'm talking govern by law, I'm talking, for instance, the likes of your Companies Act. It does tap into some elements regarding to corporate governance, but of course, pertaining to, for instance, the issue about the board committees, the responsibilities of directors, what disqualifies a director, and all that stuff, right? And then, but of course, you also have another pillar on corporate governance, which is not statutory, or should I say mandatory in nature to be complied with. These would be what we call recommended, prescribed writing or prescribed blueprints. And that's where your King 4 report falls under. I don't know if I'm making sense, colleagues. What I'm trying to explain to you is what you would see portrayed in section 2.6. I'm just trying to really portray it at a high level, okay? I'm just really trying to portray it at a high level. So that's why I'm explaining and pointing out what you would find from one source as compared to the other source. So you find what I'm explaining to you in section 2.6. And then they also touch on the governance structures in the sense of saying board committees, and then the responsibilities of assurance providers. You also have the same anyways in your audit notes. I'm talking in terms of governance structures. You have this in your audit notes. That is what you would find, for instance, within principles 7 and 8. It deals with that, right? It deals with that. So that's what you'll find in the audit notes. Then coming back to the internal audit perspective textbook, another important part of note is the role of assurance providers in governance. This, of course, now it will be something that I would cover when we get to chapter 2. The role of internal audit in providing assurance on corporate governance. So I would refer you a lot to your internal audit or your audit, your assurance audit perspective textbook, section 2.8. So this covers you a lot regarding to chapter number 2. 3 line of defense, you find it also in the audit notes. It's there. That's where combined assurance is built up on as well. Okay, but anyways, with the 3 line of defense, right, it's not just about assurance providers being part of the participants for that matter, but you also find the board's involvement in that, and you also find management also being part of the role players to the 3 line of defense in an organization. So you've got the board, management, and then you've got your assurance service providers. Does it make sense, colleagues?
Yeah, so far so good.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, just a second. Okay, so and then okay, some of these things they're not as important, but you see, this is key up to section 2.10. But this will be what I would handle or rather deal with when we get to topic 2. For topic 1, it's everything from section 2.1 all the way to section 2.7. I'm talking from your prescribed textbook. Then while this time on that as well, there is an element of of ethics, corporate ethics. Why I'm mentioning this is because in your AUI 4861, for example, they do touch or rather tap into the issue of ethics, corporate ethics and leadership. But that is something that we find in chapter 5 in this book. But I don't want to touch on that in this module, although you might come across it somewhat in some of the questions, but But for the purpose of this particular module, I just want to focus on what you need to know so that we don't diverge. But they are in certain instances where you can be tested or asked about ethical leadership. But I'll talk about it just now. So if you go in your chapter 4 of your audit notes, it's basically, it's more of your King 4 report really that is being summarized or that is being conveyed to you. And so if you go even straight into the actual King 4 report, it's divided into principles and chapters. So there are certain chapters of note for the purpose of this module, but there are some that are not as pertinent to this module per se. Chapter 2 is the one that is, of course, pertinent. And in chapter 2 of your King 4 report, that's where you find principles 1 all the way to principles number 17 of the King 4 report. These principles, guys, you need to know them. They are very important. They are very important. Now, I'm going to introduce you to the leadership principle. I'll also try to touch into organizational ethics, but not too much into detail on that because it will be highly tested in AUI 4861. And then if time allows, I might also then maybe take you guys to principle 6. In fact, principles 6, 7, and 8, I'll deal with them separately. But for today, I'll tap into principles 1 and principles 2 of the King 4 report. So let's start with the first principle on on leadership. Right. Just to confirm before I continue, let me resume. All right. Just waiting for this to resume. So guys, leadership, right? According to principle 1 of the King 4 report, it's in leadership in the sense of leadership traits which directors or members of the governing body of an organization should possess or are expected to possess. So there are about 6 of those ethical leadership principles by which directors ought to carry out their duties and responsibilities to the organization. So one of them, obviously, it's a principle to do with integrity. When you talk of integrity of a director, the integrity of a director establishes 3 important things concerning the director. Number 1, it has to do with the director's level of honesty in discharging their responsibilities to the organization. So they have to make decisions that in favor or rather to the best of interest of the organization. So in other words, they should not be found taking decisions or rather taking certain actions that go against the interests of the organization. The moment they do that, that goes against the integrity trait of a director. So in other words, in simplified terms, directors ought to act or make decisions in good faith to the best of interest of the organization in question. All right, I'm just explaining these things. I've already put footnotes on it. It's just that my PDF viewer, it's acting up a bit. So please just bear with me. I think I might need to just close and reopen it again. Is it clear?
Yeah, we can see it now.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. Okay, so these are footnotes that I've made, colleagues. Excuse me, where I've tried to summarize in a simplified form pertaining to these principles. So the first one that I was explaining, obviously, is the principle of what? Principle of integrity. So with the principle of integrity, like it's dealing really with 3 things. The first aspect, it has to do with the trustworthiness of a director. Can the director be trusted? So you can only be trusted as a director if you act in good faith, as well as making decisions that are really in the best interest of the organization that you're working for. That's what establishes your level of trust. So if you are making decisions to the best of interest of the company and acting in good faith, that's one of the things that establishes trust. Number two, when you accept due diligence and professional care, right? Accept due diligence and professional care. So due diligence, it means you assess your decisions or your actions before taking them, to say, okay, but how are they going to affect the organization at the end of the day? Is it going to be affecting the organization on the positive, or is it going to affect the organization on the negative? So also it's still trustworthiness and the element of due diligence, it also goes hand in hand. Hence, I'm mentioning here that if due diligence can be accepted if the decisions and the actions you make are really in the best of interest of the organization in question. And another important element, which is the third one, is the aspect about honesty. These three, trustworthiness, due diligence, and professional care and honesty of direct, they go hand in hand. So when you're talking of integrity, these are the things you're talking about. Can we trust this director? Trust can only be established, obviously, based on the kind of actions or steps that the director have taken on behalf of the organization. Does it make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So it's very important to take note of that. Okay. We are left with a minute, so let's reconnect again, and then I'll proceed to explain further on the next video. So we're just going to reconnect in the next minute, guys.